Welcome to the IEP Basics presentation. My name is Nancy LaCrosse and I'm an Autism Resource Specialist with the Autism Society of North Carolina. In my role at the Autism Society of North Carolina, I spend most of my time talking with families by phone. I listen to the issues families are facing and then I try to link them with resources within our organization or within the community to meet their unique needs. Frequently, we receive calls from families related to school and special education services. As a parent of an adult child with autism, I understand firsthand some of the challenges families are faced with, especially in regards to the IEP process. During this session, we will highlight the fundamentals of the IEP process, review some tips for making the process easier for you to navigate, and discuss some frequently asked questions. What is an IEP? The letters IEP stand for Individualized Education Program. An IEP is required by IDEA, which stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This law guarantees FAPE, a free, appropriate public education for all children with disabilities who need special education and related services. There is an emphasis on the word need here, which I'll explain in a few more minutes. Before the statute for the Education for All Handicapped Children Act was enacted in 1975, U.S. public schools educated only 1 out of 5 children with disabilities. Until that time, many states had laws that explicitly excluded children with certain types of disabilities from attending public school. In 1975, more than 1 million children in the U.S. had no access to the public school system. Many of these children lived in state institutions where they received limited or no education or rehabilitation services, while another 3.5 million children attended school but were warehoused in segregated facilities and received little or no education. By 2014, more than 6.6 million children in the U.S. received special education services through IDEA. In 1990, the act titled Education for All Handicapped Children was renamed the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. IDEA was last amended in 2004. There are numerous procedures and policies affecting IEPs. Individuals with Disability Education Act sets the minimum standards for the federal standards, while the North Carolina policies governing services for children with disabilities specifies the standards for providing special education services right here in North Carolina. In some cases, North Carolina policies are even more comprehensive than IDEA. For example, our state requires that a transition plan be put in place at age 14 instead of the federal mandate, which is that it would occur at age 16. The information you receive in this presentation is specific to North Carolina, and there may be some differences in other states. Who's covered by an IEP? A child with a disability from age 3 to 22 is covered if the child needs special education. Not all children who have a disability need to have special education. Many children with autism may do well in a regular education setting and not need any individualized plan to meet their educational needs. A child must have a documented disability to qualify for an IEP, meaning they need to have an evaluation from a professional that states that they do indeed have a disability. Services for preschool-age children are based on needs of that child and may not necessarily provide for a full-day preschool. Some children may receive only a half a day of preschool program to meet their needs. If a student turns 22 during the high school year, the student is allowed to finish the school year. If your child is able to attend higher education, meaning go off to college or to a university, There is not an IEP in place at that level, but it may be possible that they will be covered under ADA, which is the Americans with Disability Act, which can provide some accommodations. It's a good idea to speak with a guidance counselor or special education department about any possible supports before your child attends a college or university. Why does my child need an IEP? An IEP is a legal document. The purpose of the IEP is to provide the necessary assistance your child needs to participate in the least restrictive educational environment by providing an individualized education program specific to your child's needs, which may include access to specialists like speech therapists or occupational therapists. The accommodations and modifications in an IEP will help to level the playing field and does not provide an advantage to children with disabilities. Special education makes it possible for your child to receive their education in the least restrictive environment, known as LRE, despite their disability. How is the IEP developed? The IEP is developed by a team which includes parents, a special education teacher, a regular education teacher, a person to explain evaluation results, and a school representative. If related services are involved, such as speech therapy or occupational therapy, then those therapists can also be included. At age 14, the child with a disability is also invited to attend the IEP meeting. However, they're not required to attend. If you feel that your child would get anxious or would not be able to handle sitting in an IEP meeting, then it may be best that they not attend. If your child is able to speak on their behalf and give input on their IEP, then it may be a great idea for them to be in attendance. An IEP is revised and rewritten annually, but it can be amended at any time in the school year. Parents are members of the team. In fact, they're 50% of the team and play a very important and active role in the IEP process. Also know that you can invite anyone to the IEP meeting. It's recommended that parents have someone with them for moral support. It can be someone with knowledge or expertise regarding the child. This can be a professional, a medical provider, or even a relative. An IEP meeting can be an emotional time, and it's very helpful to have someone who can observe the interactions, help take notes, and be supportive to the family. There are several steps in the eligibility process. The first is requesting an evaluation for the child to determine if the child needs special education. If a parent is initiating the evaluation, then they should provide a written request to a teacher or principal. If it's the teacher who puts in the initial request, then the school must obtain consent from the parents before the evaluations can be conducted. In North Carolina, the school then has 90 days to do the following things. Perform the evaluation of the child. There are specific screenings for children with autism. Decide if the child meets eligibility requirements for special education services. Meet to discuss the evaluation results. Complete the IEP documentation with IEP goals, related services, modifications, and accommodations. Again, that will be only if they're eligible for the IEP. Start serving your child with special education services. Again, in the state of North Carolina, the entire process, starting from the day the written request is received, they have 90 days to complete this process, and this timeline is different from state to state. Now we'll go on to some frequently asked questions. What if I disagree with the school system's evaluation or determination of eligibility. In this case, you can request in writing an independent evaluation to be paid by the public school system. The school system must agree to this or file for a due process hearing and provide for it promptly. The school system may ask for a reason, but they may not require one. Only one independent evaluation may be requested each time evaluations are performed. Who leads the IEP meetings? While usually someone from the school will conduct the meeting, no one person is the leader of a team meeting. Decisions are made by consensus. This is not a voting situation. In some cases, the school district may adamantly refuse a request, in which case it's time to consider other means of resolving the disagreement. We'll talk about resolving disagreements briefly a little bit later. Do I have to sign the IEP documents? In North Carolina, signing the IEP does not mean you agree or disagree with the IEP. It just means you were present for the meeting. If you disagree with something in the IEP meeting, you can have it noted in the IEP forms, state clearly what you do not agree with, and ask that it be written in the meeting minutes as well. Remember to always ask that the minutes from the meeting be read back to the team at the conclusion of a meeting, and then add or change anything that needs to be revised. Can I call an IEP meeting? Yes, you can at any time. It's always a good idea to make your request in writing. When you do, give several dates and times when you're available and request a response within a reasonable time. Be sure to follow up your request with a letter if a meeting is not scheduled. Meetings should be scheduled at a mutually agreed upon time. It's reasonable to expect a meeting within about 7 to 10 days. Also remember that there are alternatives to attending an IEP meeting. Consider a telephone or video conference. Depending on your reason for wanting to have an IEP meeting, you may want to discuss it with your child's teacher first through a parent-teacher conference. Many issues can be resolved in a parent-teacher conference. The point of requesting meetings in writing or email is to keep a documented record of your request. Also, follow up any phone or in-person conversations with an email restating what was said. For example, if a teacher stated that she would get back to you in a week and it's going on the second week and you've not heard back, go back to the email and contact her, reminding her of her commitments. How's my child's placement determined? It's a common misconception to confuse IEP placement with location. When considering what parts of the day that a student is able to participate with non-disabled peers, don't forget things like lunch, recess, specials, which could include art, music, PE, or foreign language. The IEP does decide how much time is spent with non-disabled peers. From that point, it's a matter of calculating the minutes spent in regular education class to determine whether the placement is regular, resource, or separate. What do I do if I disagree with the IEP? I hope that you remember that you and the school are one team, not two separate teams. If there are disagreements, there are several steps to consider before getting an attorney. We recommend that you start with the least confrontational method first. Your procedural safeguards, which is your handbook on parents' rights, which the school will offer you at each IEP meeting, will describe these conflict resolution options in more detail. So here are a list of some of the options, and we'll take a few moments to talk about each one of these. You might consider requesting another IEP meeting. You could bring others with you to that meeting, maybe family members, friends, professionals, an advocate. You could also consider tape recording the meeting. You do need to let the school know that you want to tape record a meeting, though, so that they can also be prepared to tape it if necessary. You may want to request a facilitated IEP meeting. This written request can be made to the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Please make the request at least 2 weeks prior to the meeting. A facilitator is trained to run an effective meeting and is a neutral person in this process. If the school and parents both agree to a facilitated IEP meeting and a facilitator is available, this service will be provided free of charge to all parties. Another option is an informal or verbal complaint or formal written complaint to the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Formal complaints are investigated and resolved in 60 days. In a formal complaint, you must specify and provide proof of violations of either IDEA or the North Carolina policies. Mediation is another free option you have to resolve differences. Both parties must agree to work with a mediator. The mediator will contact both the parents and the school to hear their positions, and a meeting will be held to attempt a resolution. The last resort is to file a due process hearing, which is a legal method. This is also filed with the Department of Public Instruction. Know that this process can be expensive and can take a long time to investigate and resolve. Typically, a family that decides to pursue a due process hearing retains an attorney. Again, not all disagreements have to end up in a lawsuit. This situation can become more volatile and less open to negotiation. Also, think about what your goals are. What do you hope to gain by legal action? And will your child benefit, or will the process take longer than your child will be in the situation? Did you know that all members of the IEP team do not have to be present at all IEP meetings? If the parents put in writing and the school agree, a member of the IEP team can be excused from attending a meeting under 2 circumstances. 1, the team member's area of curriculum or related service is not being discussed or modified during the meeting. Or 2, the team member submits written input into the development of the IEP prior to the meeting. An IEP can be amended without holding an IEP team meeting. After an IEP has been written for the school year, the parents and school can agree to make some written changes to the annual IEP without a meeting. If this is done, then the entire IEP team must be notified of the changes, and the parent must request a revised copy of the IEP with the amendments included. An IEP team member does not have to be present in the room to be part of the meeting. IDEA permits video conferencing and conference calls as alternative forms of meeting. This may be especially helpful to parents who can't leave work or home to attend a meeting in person. If the school has tried and cannot reach the parents, or the parents do not show up for a scheduled meeting, then the school can proceed with the IEP meeting and make changes to the IEP. But the school must document their attempts to contact the parents. It's very important to work with the school on setting a date and time that is convenient to both parties. Again, give the school some dates and times that work best with your schedule. By the age of 8 or upon entering the 3rd grade, a child with an IEP cannot have developmental delay as the area of eligibility on the IEP forms. There are 13 other areas of eligibility for the team to consider, and one of those areas is autism. Not all children will qualify for an IEP. IDEA only provides coverage for a child with a disability, and I quote, who reason thereof needs special education and related services, end quote. For a child with a disability who does not need special education, a Section 504 plan may be an option. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 provides protection from discrimination based upon a child's disability if that disability substantially limits a major life activity, such as talking, walking, or learning. Any facility which receives federal assistance is covered by the civil rights law. In other words, Section 504 allows a person with a disability equal access to any facility or program that receives federal funding. Letter writing and emails are important. Put all requests, such as requests for a meeting and evaluations, in writing. If it isn't in writing, then there's no record that it occurred. Even if you have an informal meeting or phone conversation with someone, follow up with a thank you note or email stating all the key points, such as your understanding of the meeting, responsibilities, and deadlines. Continue to familiarize yourself with the IEP process and educate yourself as much as possible. Learn how to advocate for your child, best ways to communicate with your school and staff. Remember, too, that the teachers that work with your child may know about autism, but they may not know your child. You may consider using a communication notebook with your child's teacher, and you may want to give the teacher examples of what works for your child at home. Maintain a full copy of your child's records. Before leaving an IEP meeting, request copies of all the forms, the meeting notes, and evaluations. Organize these documents so you can easily access them when needed. You also have a right to look at your child's school records. You may request copies of any items in your child's school record, but please note that you may be charged for making copies of school records. There are tons of resources available online to help you become even more familiar with the IEP process. Here we've listed the top 6 websites that we share with folks related to the IEP process. First is our website here at the Autism Society of North Carolina. We have IEP toolkits on our website, which can be found under our Gain Knowledge tab. Additionally, please note that the Autism Society of North Carolina has 18 autism resource specialists, such as myself, serving all 100 counties in North Carolina, who can support families with the educational process. Each autism resource specialist is also a parent of a child with autism, and they have each gone through the IEP process with their own child. Wright's Law is another website which offers accurate, reliable information about special education law, and advocacy for children with disabilities. Pete and Pam Wright have written many books about special education. They lecture around the country, and they offer a free online newsletter. On the IDEA website, you can read all about the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. At the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction website, you can find all the North Carolina IEP forms, directions on how to fill these forms out, the Parents' Right Handbook, forms to request a facilitated IEP meeting, forms about mediation, forms to file a formal complaint, details about testing, information about the North Carolina curriculum, and an employee directory to those folks who are working at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. The Center for Parent Information and Resources is made possible through funding from the Office of Special Education Programs at the U.S. Department of Education. Their mission is educating parents and improving outcomes for children with disabilities. They have a lot of excellent resources on their website. Also listed on this slide is the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center, oftentimes referred to as ECAC. This organization works in conjunction with the Center for Parent Information and Resources and offers free resources such as special education workshops, special education institutes, parent training and information center, and a free lending library. As a parent of a child who received special education services for 17 years in the public schools, I understand firsthand how confusing and overwhelming the IEP process can be. In this slide, we have listed just a few books and materials that are helpful in understanding the IEP process, the laws that govern that process, and how to advocate for your child. The first resource listed is Policies Governing Services for Children with Disabilities, and this is the Special Education Regulations in North Carolina. The other books listed on this slide can be found at our bookstore, which is available either online or at our office at 505 Oberlin Road in Raleigh. Thank you for participating in the Autism Society of North Carolina's IEP Basics presentation. I hope that you're feeling a little more comfortable with the IEP process. If you have additional questions or need further assistance, please feel free to call your local autism resource specialist from the Autism Society of North Carolina.